You're listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast, hosted by Dylan Dillo Smith, Midwestern Ontario one and only MMA podcast, where we interview MMA fighters and voice actors like Sergeant Frank Woods.
What is up, everybody? It is Dillo, and welcome to another episode of the Dillo's Dojo podcast. Today is episode, I believe, 22, and shortly we are going to get to, on paper, one of the weakest pay-per-views this year, probably. Obviously, we don't know for sure yet because it's still early in the year, but it is one of the weakest pay-per-views on paper, and I'll get into why later on, and I'll go through all the fights because as of recording this, the pay-per-view just happened last night. So, without further ado, let's get into the podcast. But first, I want to cover some controversy that happened this week. Now, it's not MMA related, but it does involve a woman who was considered, and I consider her the pioneer or one of the pioneers of women's mixed martial arts. She's an actress. Everybody has been getting to know her recently for some bad reasons, but before she started to go batshit insane, everybody was starting to know her for these like big buff superwoman roles type things. Anyway, I wanted to talk about the controversy with Gina Carano and how stupid the whole thing is. And before people get mad at me and say, whoa, are you defending what she said? No. And I'm not defending people getting mad at the outrage either. In fact, I don't often share my political views because I try to steer away from that stuff. But I think it's safe to say I'm a centrist, but I'm a left-leaning side person on this debate here. But anyway, Gina Carano has been seeing quite a bit of controversy recently. This isn't the only controversy she's seen either, but she has posted some stuff on her Instagram story recently that she later did delete, I'll admit, but she posted some very tone-deaf and just simply dumb posts, or a post that was just simply dumb on her story. It was ignorant, it was tone deaf, but I'm going to get into the controversies that she was getting into far before this happened. And funny enough, a lot of this seemingly all started to come to light. All the controversies started to come to light after she kind of started seeing some stardom due to her role as Cara Dune on The Mandalorian. So anyway, I guess, like I said, this all happened in 2020. The recent controversy, obviously not, but the rest happened in 2020. And let's just get into it before I get into the meat and potatoes controversy of why she's in big trouble now. So, like I said, this isn't her first rodeo. Around mid to late 2020, I'd say probably like close to the end of mid to late. It was like the summertime it started. She started seeing some controversy on social media due to some things that she was sharing in terms of just the COVID pandemic, her beliefs on the COVID pandemic. Not the typical dumb stuff like, oh, the virus isn't real, whatever, but a lot of anti-mask memes that people didn't particularly like. And she also shared, I guess trying to get a point across. She stated that the photo that she shared was trying to get a point across that somebody can change their ideology for somebody that they love or something like that. But the photo that she decided to share was a man refusing to Sieg Heil among a crowd of Nazis just Sieg Heiling. And Twitter users went up in arms about it, got mad about it. Personally, I think it's a little dumb to get mad about that, knowing the context, but I do understand why they got mad about it. But this isn't the only time that she got in trouble either. Like, this was just the start of it. Then she started sharing the anti-mask memes later in August, and people didn't particularly like that because everybody's trying to do their part with this COVID pandemic and try to, curb the numbers and everything. But September, she saw some recent controversy. Like, it kind of went a little quiet for the coming months after September, but September, she saw a pretty big controversy where a lot of people were calling for her firing off of The Mandalorian, but nothing was done about it. And that controversy was, I don't remember exactly how it started, but essentially, she kind of was poking fun at Twitter users that like to put their preferred pronouns in their bios or their names. So the types of people that put, he, him, they, them, she, her in their names or bios. Personally, I think it's a little lame to do that, but hey, you're free to do whatever the fuck you want. And she just decided to take the absolute ever living piss out of them, by just, I guess, it started off as I don't remember exactly what she was stating, but she was spouting some turf, some turf, type of statements. And essentially, apparently what turf is an abbreviation that I don't fucking remember what it is. Excuse me if I'm ignorant and fucking uneducated, but the term means, like, I don't know the abbreviation, but the actual definition of it is someone who doesn't really believe that trans people can exist, and they oppose like transgender people and stuff. And she was spouting some, very turf like beliefs. And then, pronoun Twitter came at her. And in response, instead of apologizing and, admitting that she's ignorant about the whole situation, about the whole topic, much like myself, I'm admitting that I'm fucking ignorant about it. That's why I'm not going into too much detail about it. But instead of apologizing about it and kind of just taking the high road, she decided to take the piss out of them even more. And personally, I also think she was low-key taking the piss out of her co-star Pedro Pascal, and I'll get to him in a bit, because he kind of, just in a little bit, ties into this controversy, so I'll get into why in a bit. But she decided to put beep boop bop in her name, not on her bio, but in her actual name. And she she backpedaled when a lot of people got very angry about this. She backpedaled and a lot of people were very upset. And the way she backpedaled was she just said to all the bullies that thought that beep boop bop is me making fun of pronouns, it's not. And then something about, like, it's just me showing the internet bullies that, you just freak out over nothing. And then it was just a picture of R2D2 or something. But I know, and everybody knows for a fucking fact, that she did it to insult people with pronouns in their bios and in their names, because the way she had it was beep slash boop slash bop, which is the way people put their pronouns in their bios. They put he slash him, or she slash her, they slash them. You get the point. Well, I think it's a little lame to do that. It's, it's your profile. Do whatever you want. The way she was taking the piss out of them as a public actor who also represents Disney was pretty ignorant. And that a lot of people were very upset about that and called for her dismissal from The Mandalorian. But unfortunately, nothing was really done about it. The Mandalorian came out with no issues. Second season is great, by the way. And nothing was really kind of, said about Gina Carano in the coming months. In those passing months up until this controversy, she did share some stupid shit, some fucking conservative memes, some, anti-mask memes, some COVID memes, some fucking voter fraud memes and stuff. She was very much on the voter fraud train. Just some very, idiotic beliefs, but, nothing too dangerous. It wasn't until, there's also another controversy where I guess she was kind of supporting a commentary YouTuber that was actually insulting her co-star Pedro Pascal, saying that he's a talentless hack and he's dumb for back in the day, comparing what Trump was doing to you know Mexican families and children, to what the Nazis were doing to Jewish families and putting them in the camps. And I'll explain that in a bit. But anyway, now that you're all kind of caught up with the timeline of Gina Carano's wacky, short-lived career, well, I mean, I guess not short-lived, just short-lived stardom. It brings us to the controversy that we're on today. So a couple days ago, I want to say like Tuesday, maybe Monday, Gina Carano posted on her Instagram story. Now, mind you, this woman, she's not Gina Carano of yesteryear. May I add? She's not Gina Carano of yesteryear. She's got a big following now. On Twitter, I believe she's got close to like 1 million followers. I know for a fact that on Instagram she has about 1.8 followers, like 1.8 million followers. So she's got a pretty big following on Instagram, and it's because of what she did this year, and last year, whatever, with The Mandalorian. However, like I said, what I'm about to read out and explain to you and describe to you is the most tone deaf and ignorant statement I have ever read. I don't particularly think she's anti-Semitic. I do think she's fucking dumb, though. And, if this is what you genuinely believe, first of all, you should probably educate yourself a bit more. And second of all, keep this stuff in private between, your private life. Don't put it on your platform of 1.8 million followers. But anyway, I'll just get into it. So, briefly, for a couple hours at least, she had an Instagram story of a picture. It's a very famous picture from World War II of a young Jewish woman that appears to be in, I don't know, I want to say some lingerie, but probably back then it was like their form of underwear or something. She's running through the streets with a bloody nose, and she's being chased by youth who are wielding rocks, 2x4s, and such. And under or above that or underneath that was a very long caption that that read this, and it was in how do I put this? I'm having a brain fart right now because it's a little bit later at night as I'm recording this, and I'm not all there. I'm pretty stoned, but she was comparing this to being bullied on social media for her stupid statements and her ignorant views. But anyway, she put this in the caption. Ready? Jews were beaten in the streets, not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbors, even by children. Because history is edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views? And, pretty tone deaf, right? I'm sorry. I was just at a loss for words. Just reading that again, I'm at a loss for words again. She didn't apologize for it. She got a lot of flack for it. And she deleted it shortly after she got the flack. And shortly after that, it was announced that she got immediately fired from Disney as a whole, and she's fired from the Mandalorian, from her role as the Mandalorian, or not as the Mandalorian, but on the Mandalorian. She missed out on getting technically her own spinoff as well. She just essentially shot herself in the foot, and I just gotta say, conservatives are absolutely fuming about it, and they shouldn't be, because they're screaming freedom of speech, and that this is a plight against freedom of speech. But I have to just, even as a Canadian, I have to weigh in here. She's not being persecuted legally. She's not seeing any legal repercussions from it. She's not seeing any prison time for the ignorance she spewed. In fact, she seems to have gotten away scot-free because after being fired from Disney, which, funny enough, has a past of anti-Semitism, and she gets fired for what people were believing was anti-Semitism. She gets picked up by none other than right-wing Jew man Ben Shapiro, which is the funniest thing I can probably think of, because I get it. He's trying to make a stand against freedom of speech, as the rest of these fucking idiots are doing. But just the fact that a Jewish man is, you know, just wholeheartedly and wantingly platforming someone who has been ignorantly comparing what she's going through today to what the Nazis did to the Jews in 1940s Germany. I just something about it makes me fucking smile and just giggle because it's funny. But anyway, she didn't really get too many repercussions for it. She just got fired. But the thing I'm gonna say for those idiots that are screaming freedom of speech and that this is against freedom of speech, she didn't receive any legal repercussions for it. The only thing that she received was dismissal from her contract, which, here's why that was allowed. So, as an employee, you have a certain code of conduct to follow. So, it's with any job, really, as a fast food employee, a retail employee, an executive, or whatever. You have a code of conduct to follow, and that code of conduct is to not so much spout your political beliefs and to represent the company in a positive light, in a neutral, positive light as best as possible. And for contractors, such as actors and, in UFC's case, fighters and stuff, you are under obligation to follow a morality clause where you can't be open about certain political beliefs that are, offensive, not just stupid, but actually offensive or can be harmful to the company's reputation. And if you do that under the action of that contract, of that clause or the code of conduct, you can be fired for it. And it's perfectly legal, and it's always been perfectly legal. And I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. If you're not representing the company in a proper light, they have every right to fire you because you're not following their code of conduct. And that's exactly what she wasn't doing. They've been very careful. Like, I see there's a lot of people posting hypocrisy with Disney and their treatment with China, even though China's very anti-black, anti-Muslim, and, I think that's extremely fucking wrong. So, it is pretty hypocritical of Disney for doing this, but it's not anything against freedom of speech. And she's not really receiving any punishment from it. She immediately got picked up by Ben Shapiro. She's starring in a fucking Ben Shapiro film now. Obviously, that's not going to pay as much as The Mandalorian did, but she didn't get deplatformed. She didn't have to properly apologize. She didn't really receive any punishment from this. But I've been seeing a lot of people comparing this to what Pedro Pascal posted a couple of years ago. And essentially what Pedro Pascal posted was just, it was a picture of a couple of Jewish people behind a fence in a concentration camp looking at the camera, and it said 1944 Germany or something like that. And then below it, it showed these Mexican children, these Hispanic children, and behind a fence, like a caged fence, and what looked like a ice facility. And he was essentially just comparing that to what the Germans did back then to the Jews, just minus the forced labor and the gassing. Like, they essentially kind of did the same thing. They went house to house because they thought they were subhuman, or immigrants, whatever in this case, and they started ripping them from their families and separating them. And that's exactly what the Germans did back then. So, I mean, yes, I'd say that Pedro's comparison is a little bit dramatic, but at least that has some weight to it because it makes a lot of sense. It doesn't seem like they're crying victim. Like that was a serious situation, and I don't know if it's still going on, but if it is, it still is a serious situation. So that's kind of understandable. But yeah, a lot of people are just calling for Pedro Pascal's firing, and I don't get that. But the whole issue with Gina Carano, essentially, just TLDR. If you skip to this part where the second half is, TLDR, she said some stuff very ignorantly comparing how she's treated on the internet and how she's dunked on for being a racist idiot on the internet, comparing that to being Jewish back in 1944. So essentially saying that, I am the same as a Jewish person because me spouting my ignorant, uneducated beliefs is the same as being judged for your religion. No. No, it's not. But, you do you, sweetheart. You enjoy being Ben Shapiro's little butt buddy. Good luck to you, Gina. Please stay the fuck away from social media. And to anybody else who has those ignorant, uneducated views, just keep them to yourself. Just educate yourself is all I'm saying. And to all the idiots out there actually defending Gina Carano and saying what happened to her was unfair, okay, you go into work tomorrow and start spouting your ignorant beliefs about the pandemic to everyone like it's a soapbox, and you start comparing how you're dunked on social media to how the Jews were treated back in 1940s Germany and all that, and see how that goes down with everybody. Or, you could go one further and say that, being a Republican in today's climate is the same as being black in 1950s America. See how that goes down. I doubt it will go down well, folks. So, yeah, to all the idiots defending her and her stupidity, don't. She's a big girl. She can deal with her shit herself. She knows what she did wrong. And she can just, frankly, fucking grow the fuck up and shut the fuck up. And just take responsibility for being ignorant. She's kind of gotten away with being ignorant for a little bit too long now. Ever since the whole, sharing the Nazi photo supposedly thing up until now. She's gotten absolutely nothing done to her. And she's just gotten yelled at on social media. So, it's about time she's gotten accountability for her actions. She hasn't taken accountability for her actions, but she has gotten some consequences for her actions, and it's about time. Part of me, though, thinks that, she's not all there mentally. And I just think her weird-ass conspiracy theories kind of, corroborate that. But anyway, that's enough about this. I've been ranting about the Gina Carano situation for too long. I'm going to get on to this coming card now. But before we get into that, I just wanted to go through the main card of UFC 259. It is going to be fucking stacked. So let's get right into this shit. Alright, so this card makes up for UFC 258 being so weak on paper. We'll get into the next weekend's event as well near the end of the podcast, but I just wanted to just appreciate how stacked of a card that this pay-per-view is going to be. So UFC 259 is going to be happening on March 6th in Las Vegas, and the main event alone is enough to watch it. I personally am a little upset at the main event because I thought a certain light heavyweight should have got the title shot. But nonetheless, the main event is Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya for the light heavyweight title. A champ versus champ super fight. And if that wasn't enough to quench your thirst, before that fight is a women's featherweight co-main event for the title. The greatest women's fighter of all time, Amanda Nunes, goes up against recent controversies victim Megan Anderson. No, honestly though, she's a world-class fighter as well, world-class kickboxer, and she's hoping to derail Amanda Nunes and take one of her belts from her. And if that wasn't enough, before that title bout, we got a bantamweight title bout between the champ, Peter Yan, and Aljamain Sterling. So this fight was supposed to happen for a while now. It's finally been booked. This could have been its own main event. Same with the co-main event of this event. Could have been its own main event of a pay-per-view. But 3 title fights that are all big caliber. That's amazing. But that's not even enough for the main card. Not only that, but before all the title fights, we've got Islam Makhachev up against Drew Dober, which is going to be a slobber knocker fest, and probably a good win for Islam Makhachev. And before that, Thiago Santos up against Alexander Rakic. So the main card itself is stacked as fuck. But the prelims, not even the early prelims, the ESPN, as they call it, or ESPN Plus prelims alone. And this is what actually, racks my mind a lot, is Dominic fucking Cruz, one of the greatest bantamweights of all time, is headlining the prelims against Casey Kenny. And if that wasn't enough for you, one of the greatest flyweights of all time to do it, that went up against Figgy, went up against DJ, Joseph Benavidez is going up against a absolute killer prospect in Askar Askarov. Like, this card is going to be one to not miss. And if you love fights, even as somewhat of a casual, even the prelims themselves is something to not miss. Even the early prelims, there's some no-name fights for you more casual guys out there. Catch those, because you'll end up finding a new fighter that you love. And like I said, these fights on the prelims alone are not going to disappoint at all. And then if that wasn't enough, you could just buy the pay-per-view, because if UFC 258 wasn't worth buying, which, trust me, it wasn't, this one is definitely worth buying. So UFC 259 is shaping up to be an absolute stacked card, and I cannot wait. Now, obviously, hold on a second, knock on wood here, because I'm hoping that none of these fights get canceled, that this fight, this whole entire card stays intact, but I am so excited for this card. The 3 title fights are enough to get excited for alone, but Dominic Cruz making his return since getting starched by Henry Cejudo against Casey Kenny, and then Joseph Benavidez going up against an absolute killer prospect with no losses. Hopefully Joseph Benavidez can derail that hype train and take his O, but I don't know if that's going to actually happen. Like, these fights are stacked. And then on the main card, we've got Thiago Santos and Islam Makhachev fighting. Both incredible guys in their weight classes. I'm just excited for this entire card. And if that wasn't enough, we've got a couple more main events that are actually incredible before that. So, next weekend, like the one I'm going to get into like in a bit at the end of the card, or at the end of the podcast here, is we've got 2 back-to-back heavyweight main events, but the first one that I'll be covering at the end of the podcast is next week's main event between Derek Lewis and Curtis Blades. That's going to be a fun one, because Curtis Blades is a wrestler. He's very dominant on the ground, very good with ground and pound. But Derek Lewis is a man who just does not give a fuck about wrestling or jiu-jitsu. In Derek Lewis's world, that shit doesn't exist. Everybody thinks it's retarded when you say, just stand up, bro. But then Derek Lewis goes into the cage and proves why that's not a stupid decision after all. You can just stand up with enough heart, enough Derek Lewis strength. You can stand up. So Derek Lewis is going up against Curtis Blades. That's going to be a fun one, a fun fight. And then if that wasn't enough to, quench your heavyweight thirst, the next weekend after that, we've got an absolute banger of a main event. 2 heavyweight kickboxers going up against each other. Jarginho Rosenstruck, the guy who upset Alistair Overeem at the very last seconds of round number 5 in their main event, and the guy who was on a fast track to a title shot until he was put out by Francis Ngannou, who is no slouch. It's, nothing to be feel bad about. Francis Ngannou could fucking blow on you and he would knock you out because he has that much power in his entire body. So there's nothing to feel bad about for that. And, he's coming back from that. And he's going up against an undefeated kickboxer in Cyril Gane from France, who has been on an absolute tear. He's been on a constant, I think a 3 or 4 fight win streak in the UFC now. All of them have been finishes. He's just shown how deadly he is with his striking. Jairzinho has been more like kick heavy and more wild with his punches, but Cyril Gane is more patient. But both guys have the power to put each other out, and it's just going to be a fun main event, or at least I'm hoping. So both of those fights are going to be incredible. But without further ado, I know the thing you guys are waiting for is for me to cover UFC 258. Sorry. So let's get into UFC 258. Was it as good as it looked on paper? Well, considering that, it didn't look the best on paper, it's pretty simple to say that, yeah, no, it was better in person and live. So we'll get into that. I'll see you guys in the next half of the podcast. Alrighty, everybody. So let's get into UFC 258 now. Lucky for you guys, there was some pretty decent fights on the prelims. I'll be covering the 2 ones that I thought were, of note. Actually 3. I'll be glossing over one of them because it was a longer fight and a decision. But it happened to involve one of my favorite fighters, so we'll get into that in a bit. But the first one I'm going to cover is a women's strawweight bout between Polyana Viana and Mallory Martin. And Polyana Viana is known for her submission game and how deadly she is on the ground, but she actually made headlines a couple of years back in Brazil when a man tried to mug her, and she beat the ever-living snot out of him unsuspectingly. It was hilarious. There was pictures of the guy's beaten face. He looked so sad. It was absolutely silly. And she was making her walk in the octagon tonight up against Mallory Martin, and her fight ended fairly quick. It was pretty back and forth on the feet until it hit the ground. And then once it was on the ground, Polyana Viana just started really, kind of going all over and just attacking with all sorts of submission attempts until she got what looked like a triangle armbar, and she, got the armbar, forced the tap, and ended up finishing Mallory Martin at the end of round 1. And I think it should have gotten, if that doesn't get submission of the night, then, the next fight's coming up, one of them might. So the next one I'm going to be talking about, the one I'm going to be glossing over real quick, is Belal Muhammad versus Diego Lima. This one didn't go exactly the way I thought. I thought 1, Belal Muhammad was going to, submit Diego Lima, or 2, Diego Lima was going to put on more of a show. But Belal Muhammad played a very smart game. He feinted in and out. He did very well with his feints, actually. Held the pace the entire time, mixed it up very well, went to the body and head, very balanced, would threaten takedowns. He maybe got like 1 or 2 of them out of like the many that he attempted, but he was mixing it up with those takedowns, keeping Diego Lima guessing. And the entire fight, he just had Diego Lima on the back foot, backing up, circling the cage, and just cutting off that, that route for Diego Lima. So Belal Muhammad just played a very, very smart game. He looked very impressive out there. Diego Lima looked very upset with his performance, and I don't blame him, but, he's a very good fighter as well. He was on a 4 or 5 fight winning streak up until that point, so, he's no slouch either, and he will be back, but Belal Muhammad just showed that he's a veteran. There's a reason why he's a veteran in that cage, and he belongs there, and it was just a great showcase out by him. Plus, I love how he fights. Not only that, but I love his social media. He's fucking hilarious. Him and Jared Gordon are just 2 of the funniest dudes on social media. Those 2 together, because they used to be roommates, or maybe they still are. They tease each other all the time, and it's just hilarious. But Belal Muhammad wins by decision against Diego Lima. And then headlining the prelims was the undefeated ADCC champion, the Abu Dhabi champ, Rodolfo Vieira, up against Anthony Hernandez. And this fight went completely wacky, folks. So it went the way that you'd think in the beginning. Rodolfo Vieira went for the takedown. He got it, was threatening with a bunch of submission attempts, but Anthony Hernandez, everybody was sleeping on his grappling, including me, man, and just defended incredibly well. And Rodolfo Vieira just gassed out very quickly. And Anthony Hernandez he capitalized on that perfectly, was threatening submissions, just smothering on the ground, and just constantly making Rodolfo Vieira just exert more energy, not letting him breathe. When they'd get to the feet, he would smother him with strikes or clinches, take him back to the ground. And eventually, in the second round, he ended up getting I believe it was an anaconda choke. Maybe no, it wasn't an anaconda choke. It might have been a triangle choke. Some sort of choke he got on Rodolfo Vieira in the second round and forced him to tap and just absolutely upset everyone. I think his result was like a plus 3,000 or 4,000 in odds. So that's just kind of telling you how fucking shocking this finish was. But it was a great showcase by Anthony Hernandez. I don't know what the hell happened to Rodolfo Vieira, but I hope he comes back a lot better. And, he's an incredible grappler, so I'm excited to see what he does next. But Anthony Hernandez, man, gets it done and, makes light of that perfect stage and shocks the world. So I'm excited to see that kid and what he does, because if he can do that against a world-class grappler, man, like, I can't wait to see what else he can do in the future and how soon he's going to want to fight again. So we'll see. But that was the prelims, and I'm glad that I got to talk about the prelims, because sometimes with these pay-per-views, especially the ones that don't look good on paper, you don't get to talk about the prelims much, never mind the main card. But then, every so often you get that diamond in the rough where, the prelims are good and maybe even the main card is good. And I think the biggest example, actually, that I remember, and is one of my personal, if not my personal favorite UFC card to date, is UFC 206 in Toronto. It lost its headliner, which was supposed to be Rumble Johnson versus Daniel Cormier for the light heavyweight title. And I think Rumble had to pull out, I believe, or maybe DC did. I don't remember, citing injury. And unfortunately, and fortunately, kind of, Max Holloway and Anthony Pettis headlined the show for the interim featherweight title, I believe. And that was fun, but the fights leading up to that were incredible. I remember my favorite fight to date is still the Cub Swanson versus Duho Choi fight. I will always bring that up in my favorite fight of all time, one of the greatest fights of all time. Everybody cites that as like one of the greatest fights of all time because it was on such a weak card and it just had the fans exploding. Another fight on that card was Matt Brown versus Donald Cerrone, which was an incredible fight between those two and ended in a fucking brutal finish. It was just an incredible card, but anyway, getting on to the main card of UFC 258, like I said, it didn't look too good to start off with when I reviewed it last. And then we ended up losing some fights. Pedro Munoz's fight ended up getting dropped from the card. Jillian Robertson's fight against Miranda Maverick ended up getting dropped from the card. So the main card we ended up getting was good old Kamaru Usman Burns, Macy Barber Grasso, Kelvin Gastelum, Ian Heinisch, Ricky Simon, Brian Kelleher, which was the new addition, and Maki Pitalo, Julian Marquez. So, name brand on paper that don't look too impressive at all. But anyway, that's why I said don't judge, because UFC 206 looked weak too. Anyway, so I am actually really excited to talk about this because pretty much every single fucking fight delivered. Oh, I wouldn't say it's super noteworthy, but I can see why it didn't get many pay-per-view buys if it didn't, but it definitely was worth it if you did buy it because all the fights delivered. To start off, we have the middleweight fight between both Contender Series alumni, actually, Maki Pitolo and Julian Marquez. Maki Pitolo being a season 3 alumni, Julian Marquez being a season 1 alumni. Both of these guys came out from the start and just threw bombs. Maki Pitolo especially came out aggressively at the start. Just started throwing bombs, was getting in his face, backing him up against the cage, taking him down too, like going for the takedowns right away, mixing it up. But Julian Marquez, man, his grappling, yet again, like Anthony Hernandez, I slept on his grappling, and he did an incredible job on the ground with Maki Pitolo. He was threatening these submissions, and then they'd get up to the feet, and then he'd smother him into the clinch, and that's, how the whole fight ended up going. He just continuously smothered him in the clinch. And then, Maki Pitolo would just, batter Julian Marquez. And then the second round, Julian Marquez started coming back, hitting him with some bombs, getting the takedowns, threatening submissions on the ground. And it was a constant back and forth fight, but Maki Pitolo won the second round. It was like 2-0, I believe, going into the third round. And Julian Marquez, okay, so first of all, Maki Pitolo was winning 2-0, but he was looking notably exhausted. Julian Marquez, however, who was looking pretty beat up, was looking fresh as a daisy, as fresh as a middleweight could look. And it was awesome because he came out aggressive, started outpacing Maki Pitolo, hitting him with these heavy shots that were actually rocking Maki Pitolo, hitting him with these like spinning back fists that would rock Maki Pitolo. And it was a constant like striking affair where Julian Marquez was starting to kind of churn up the heat. And then with the seconds counting down in the third round, Julian Marquez hits this spinning back fist, I believe, or like an elbow, a spinning elbow or something, and drops Maki Pitolo and starts swarming him on the ground and starts pummeling him with strikes. Maki Pitolo's covering up. He quickly goes into an anaconda choke and squeezes and forces Maki Pitolo to tap. And it was just an incredible showcase. Julian Marquez knew he needed a finish. He saw that Maki Pitolo was tired, and he just capitalized on it. It was great. And then, how about his post-fight fucking call-out, man? He didn't call out anybody. He didn't call out a single fighter. Today is Valentine's Day, and you know who he calls out? Miley fucking Cyrus. And my man shot his shot. He shot that shot from, like, just a little bit from half. A little bit over half. And he got that in. He got that fucking shot in. Miley Cyrus saw it, replied, said, "If you shave MC in your chest, I'm yours. I'm all yours, love," or whatever. And I was like, "Oh man, the man is in. Hell yeah!" But anyway, if that wasn't enough for you on the card, the next fight was guaranteed to bring fireworks because we have Brian Kelleher, who's just known for his exciting fights. He's got a plethora of submissions and he's got fucking absolute knockout power. He's known for brawling, and he's good anywhere the fight goes. Up against Ricky Simone, who's a pretty good up-and-coming prospect. He was at bantamweight, but this is his first fight at featherweight, I believe. Brian Keller's second fight at featherweight, I believe. And these two have been calling each other out for a while now. They've been proposing this fight idea for a while now. I believe it's been booked like once or twice, but the dates have fallen through. So it was pretty awesome that they ended up getting this date. And the whole lead up to it and how they announced this fight was pretty cute as well. They did it with the whole Valentine's Day themes, asking Ricky Simon if he could be Brian Kelleher's Valentine on February 13th and stuff. And when they found out that the date, that the fight was actually happening, I think Brian Kelleher messaged Ricky Simone saying, "It's happening, babe," or something like that. And Ricky Simone said, "I'll see you then, babe," or XOXO or some shit like that. It was just funny what they were doing. So, it was just nothing but good spirits between these guys, good sportsmanship. But the thing is, you knew these guys were going to bring it when you got into the octagon, and that's exactly what happened. But Ricky Simone, man, just being the better fighter, just neutralizing Brian Kelleher's wild fighting, making Brian Kelleher look useless on the ground for the most part, just being the better grappler. He was smothering, just constantly threatening with submissions. He wasn't laying there. He was just constantly moving every time Kelleher would try to fucking roll. And then when they got to the feet, it was like a back and forth against the cage. They were just rolling back and forth against the cage, clinching. And then, once it got back to the floor again, it was back and forth, but mostly Ricky Simone just transitioning to all these different positions. So, through 3 rounds, Ricky Simone just completely dominated Brian Kelleher, constant 10-9s all the way through. And yeah, just as you guessed it, the scorecards read 30-27 all around when Ricky Simone gets his first win at featherweight. So, it didn't go exactly the way you'd think, but it was still an entertaining fight to say the least, because it was very fast-paced and scrambly on the ground, and then on the feet, both guys were throwing and hitting heavy shots, but, Ricky Simone was just, eating these shots like they were nothing, so, that was awesome. But then, if that wasn't enough for you, we had a middleweight fight, and it was everybody's favorite fat middleweight, Kelvin Gastelum, up against Ian Heinisch. And Kelvin, this man has not gotten a win since around May 2018. And, I think May 2018 was the last time he got a win. And, I gotta say, I was getting a little worried because he's a young guy, he's not, I don't even think he's in his prime yet. I think he's just approaching his prime. He's like 29 and he's on this big losing streak, but I have to say, he looked incredible in this fight. He neutralized Ian Heinisch's game plan perfectly. He was just better in every aspect of the game last night against Ian Heinisch. He out-wrestled Ian Heinisch on the ground, out-grappled Ian Heinisch on the ground, threatened submissions on the ground, and when they were on the feet, he did incredible with his feints and was constantly throwing strikes and just mixing it up on the ground with kicks and everything, and just he just did incredible. He just looked like a whole new Kelvin Gastelum. It looked like he was more motivated than he was in the Jack Hermanson fight. And he just did an incredible job. And ended up, edging out a decision against Ian Heinisch. Another 10-9, 10-9, 10-9. I believe it was like 30-27, 29-28, 29-28 all around. But yeah, no. It was a very great performance by Kelvin Gastelum considering his recent performances. So, never count the guy out, because it's not like, he's been knocked out or anything. I believe, he got dropped by Izzy, yeah, but he gave Izzy the hardest fight of his life. Also, he fought Darren Till to a decision and got submitted by Jack Hermanson, but he didn't look too motivated in that fight. So there was a lot of factors there, but, anyway, that's enough for that fight. Congratulations to Kelvin Gastelum. Tough luck for Ian Heinisch, but he'll be back because he's also young. He's a great prospect, and I can't wait to see what he does. But Kelvin Gastelum, congratulations on getting in the W column again. I can't wait to see who they put him up against, man. It's going to be interesting. But that leads us to our weak-ass co-main event. I don't know how the fuck Marcy Baber. Fuck me. I don't know how Macy Barber got this co-main event slot. And, as much as cute as Alexa Grasso is, she shouldn't be in this main event or co-main event slot. And she's only here because of Macy Barber. But, again, the matchup, not just the placement on the card bothers me because it's the co-main, but they put Macy Barber up against somebody like Alexa Grasso. It's like the matchmakers didn't fucking learn anything when they put her against Roxanne Modafferi. Seriously. They didn't. They seriously fucking didn't. This girl is too hyped for her own good. She's only getting by through pure strength and size and physicality alone. Her skill set is pretty subpar, and she needs to improve it. And what the UFC seems to be doing is pushing her too quickly. And yet again, last night, that's exactly what happened. Macy Barber hit some good shots last night, and I'll admit that. I'm not going to counter out too much, but Alexa Grasso was just too much for Macy Barber. Was too strong for her. Her shots clearly hurt Macy Barber a lot. Kept backing Macy Barber up. And then when Macy Barber was controlling the distance, instead of, throwing a jab to kind of keep Alexa Grasso moving back, she would throw jabs and, combos from like 2 meters away. Like social distancing. She was literally taking social distancing too seriously and just throwing like shadow boxing. Some like Cat Zingano shit or whatever. Where she was just shadow boxing the fucking air, which is absolutely weird. And on the ground yet again, she looked like she didn't know what to do. A Mexican boxer, did better than her on the ground. Was completely dominating her on the ground. Was dominating her in the clinch. Yeah, there was times where Macy Barber would reverse it and have Alexa Grasso against the cage, but that wouldn't last long because Alexa Grasso would, you know, just reverse that and put her against the cage and would just constantly beat Macy Barber up against the cage. And man, oh man, it was just sad to watch. It wasn't a bad beatdown. It was just one of those things where as an MMA fan, you're looking at this like, this isn't bad, but why the fuck is this fight even a thing? We've got, an experienced veteran in Alexa Grasso up against the unproven Macy Barber, who's coming off of a 1-year layoff after being absolutely dominated by Roxanne Modafferi, who is currently in the women's flyweight division, a gatekeeper. As much as I love Roxanne Modafferi, that's exactly what she is. And like I said, I don't know what they expected. You put Macy Barber up against competition that's better than her last loss, and you expected her to get back in the win column. That's just plain ridiculous, my guy. And I want to know who made that matchmaking decision. And whoever it was, either Macy Barber sucked some good dick for that, or he needs to be fired, because that was poor matchmaking, essentially. Anybody who knows anything about MMA and wasn't just simping for Macy Barber knew the predetermined outcome of that fight. I had it by decision. I'm pretty sure anybody else on Verdict had it by decision. It was so obvious that that was the way it was going to go. Anyway, I've ranted too much about Macy Barber. A lot of people are going to ask why I don't like her. Just simply enough, her past actions have shown that she's not a good person. She's an arrogant bitch. Not because she's a confident woman. Nothing wrong with that. It's just how arrogant she is. How she tried to Photoshop Austin Vanderford, or also known as Paige Van Zant's husband, sliding into her DMs. She also exposed Roxy being a nice person and trying to warn her about the weight cut situation. Discounted Roxy's win, took the fucking mic away from Roxy. She's just been a very arrogant person, all in all. Just a very terrible, terrible person. And that's why I don't like her. But anyway, that brings us to the main event of the evening. The reason why you probably would have bought in the pay-per-view if you were so inclined to. And that is the welterweight title fight between former teammates Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Durinho Burns. This fight was originally supposed to happen at UFC 251, but as everybody knows, Gilbert Burns had to pull out about 6 days away or 7 days out because of a COVID test going positive. And he has actually gone on to explain his experience with that COVID virus, that it was very violent and, he thought at some points he was going to die. And it's nothing to fuck around with, but he's glad that he's better now and he's in great shape. So he, he's coming back from a very long, not a 1-year layoff, but a very long, like half a year layoff, where he was just recovering from that and just trying to get back in shape and everything. And instead, Kamaru Usman, he actually beat Jorge Masvidal in a very one-sided fight for the welterweight title, and a lot of people are calling for that rematch. But anyway, so these two guys are former teammates, but Kamaru actually left for Colorado to train with Trevor Whitman. So, they were trying to manufacture this type of bad blood bullshit between the two. I don't buy it. I don't buy it one bit. But anyway, Kamaru was trying to, sell the whole bad blood thing. The guys came out. They seemed pretty good coming out. Um, fucking Gilbert came out to some shit. I don't know. I want to say Bob Dylan or something. Somebody came out to Bob Dylan last night. I'm trying to remember what Gilbert came out to. But fucking Kamaru Usman came out to "Ain't Play No Game with These." I love that song, man, and it was so dope. And when he was coming out, he was just rapping to it, just hopping on the balls of his feet and shit, just looking all hyped as fuck. And like as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh no, this is over. Gilbert Burns is done. If this isn't a finish, Gilbert Burns is gonna lose by decision. I thought Gilbert Burns has to finish this, or Kamaru's just gonna dominate him all 5 rounds. I was wrong, but I was right at the same time. So these two guys meet in the middle of the cage after their introductions, and the stare down is just absolutely intense. They're just like inches apart, man. It's like some fucking scene out of a romantic movie. You're almost expecting them to just share a passionate kiss. I'm pretty sure I think Herb Dean was the ref for last night for the main event. Whoever the ref was like, you guys please back up. I need to stand in between you guys so I can give you the instructions. And as he did that, Kamaru just wanted to get the fight started, man. He started heading back to his corner, but then he had to go back to listen to the instructions. No glove touch, nothing. And then the bell rang. Gilbert Burns comes out swinging, man, hurts Kamaru with heavy shots, and then smells the blood in the water and just starts hitting Kamaru with these nice heavy shots and just starts hurting him. Knocked Kamaru on all fours with a nice overhand and started trying to finish Kamaru, but Kamaru stayed calm, stayed composed, just defended himself, stayed patient, and I guess Gilbert Burns did admit later on in the post-fight press conference he got a little too excited and he did a Cody Garbrandt and exhausted all of his energy trying to finish Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman, survived that initial onslaught, and then the two kind of fought on the ground for dominance and against the cage for dominance for a little bit until the bell rang for the first round to end. And, it was great for Gilbert. Everyone, easy 10-9 for Gilbert. Kamaru lost that first round easy. But there was something wrong. Gilbert was looking a little chipped up and he was looking exhausted. Kamaru took advantage of that. Kamaru's cardio is just something of another world. And he took advantage of that. And in the second round came in and started clinching him and just throwing these nice shots. His jab in particular was just lightning. Just landing down the middle at all times, and like every time it would land, it would snap Gilbert's head back. He was hitting these nice right hands too, these right overhands that would hit every now and then, and they would hurt Gilbert and have him stumbling. So it was just a really good performance by Kamaru in the second round. He started to kind of get his feeling. He realized that Gilbert kind of exhausted all his energy. And, he was like, I've got all the energy in the world to do this. So, this guy's mine. And he, like I said, stayed calm and composed in the second round, picked his shots, hurt Gilbert a couple times, dropped Gilbert a couple times. Gilbert, weirdly enough, he did this in the first round too. But when Gilbert got knocked down in the second round, he stayed on the ground. He didn't look hurt at all. He kind of like backed up on the ground and started kind of like inviting Kamaru on the ground and bicycling. I know what he was doing. He wasn't, trying to bicycle on an invisible bicycle. He was bicycle kicking, hoping that when Kamaru does come in for a bomb, he'll get caught by an up kick and it'll knock him out. So, he was wasting time doing that and just wasting energy bicycle kicking his legs away. And he did that in the first round too, when he almost finished Kamaru Usman and they went to the ground, and then Kamaru got back up and Gilbert just laid there and started bicycle kicking, and Kamaru just waited for him and started kicking him in the ass. So anyway, yeah, the second round was all Kamaru. He dropped Gilbert, and Gilbert just started looking more exhausted as the time went on. And near the end of the round, he dropped Gilbert one more time, and Gilbert looked hurt. Going into the third round, though, and this is why I like this finish, because Trevor Whitman said this specifically to Kamaru Usman going into the third round. He said, "That's the jab of a champion. You got the jab of a champion. Keep throwing that jab. Believe in that jab. You've got that championship jab." And he just kept emphasizing that. And so that's what Kamaru did. He went out, used his distance a little bit and started stinging him with that left-hand jab. Just snapping his head back. Hit him a couple times. I think after the third jab, he drops Gilbert. And you could tell after that third jab that dropped Gilbert on his ass, like on his back and ass, Gilbert was hurt. So Kamaru just comes in with this bomb and starts just pounding on these fucking shots. Gilbert is so clearly hurt and wobbled, but Gilbert's slowly getting to his feet. But unfortunately, Kamaru hits him with more shots, and Herb Dean has to step in and finish the fight. And Gilbert's just fucked, like just out of it. He couldn't even get on the stool. He tried to get on the stool and fell back, hit his head off the stool. They tried to put him back on the stool again. He got on the stool, but he looked woozy as he was like sitting back on the stool. It was bad, man. He got ate alive by Kamaru Usman, and it just makes me think, man, how dangerous is Kamaru Usman now, man? How dangerous is he? I cannot wait to see who he's going up against. Part of me wants that Kobe rematch, man, but also part of me wants to see Leon Edwards go up against him finally. But first, I want to see Leon Edwards fight a contender first, because the man's ranked number 3 and he hasn't had a fight since 2019. The other fights that are on the table are Masvidal, but I don't think Masvidal kind of wants that. Masvidal has called for that rematch, but he's also said that he wants a win before he gets that rematch. Obviously, like I said, Kobe Covington's on the table, but there was somebody that interested me that threw their hat into the ring, and that happens to be the nicest motherfucker of all time, the nicest motherfucker champ. Here's the thing. This is good for Kamaru, because Kamaru beat the baddest motherfucker. Now he can beat the nicest motherfucker. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson put his name in the hat for a title shot, because he's been doing pretty good recently. He's been on a tear as of late, and his most recent performance against Jeff Neal was pretty solid, considering he's like 38 and he's on the later edge of his prime, but he's still showing off the way he did. So I'm excited to see if that might be the fight to make. But that was it for UFC 258. Kamaru Usman said he'd fight anybody, so we'll see who he ends up fighting. But like I said, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson put his name in the hat. Maybe that'll happen. That's it for the UFC 258 main event. The next weekend's event, though, is, like I said, going to be a fun one, and I'll get into why it's going to be a fun one. All right, so this card, the prelims alone are looking stacked for any hardcore MMA fan. This is more for the hardcore MMA fans. I'm going to say that now. The main event is for a little bit more of the casuals, because, Derek Lewis is in the main event, so that's going to be fun. But this entire card is just screaming MMA fan, and it's so stacked from head to toe. I love pretty much every single fight on this card, on the prelims, on the main card. It doesn't sound impressive when I name these out, but I assure you, these are all going to be fun fights. So, to start off the night, we've got Sergey Spivak versus Jared Vandera, and then after that, we've got Firas Zahabi's little brother, Ayman Zahabi, up against Draco Rodriguez. And then following that is Chaz Skelly up against Jamal Emmers. After that is a women's flyweight bout between Shayna Dobson and Casey O'Neill. After that is Nate Landwehr up against Julian Erosa in the featherweight division. And after that is, surprisingly, Eddie Wineland versus John Castaneda. And this is a fight that I'm excited for. The next one, a lightweight bout between Drakkar Klose versus Luis Violent Bob Ross Piana. And I'm excited for that one because I love Violent Bob Ross. And then the next fight is a featherweight bout that has one of my favorite fighters of all time and one of the most inspirational stories of how to overcome addiction and how to better your life. that I love. Jared Gordon going up against Danny Chavez in the featherweight division. And then headlining the prelims is the veteran, the Pitbull, Andre Arlovsky going up against Tom Aspinall in the heavyweight division. So old versus young in the heavyweight division. But that's not all. We also got a main card. And that main card's got Philip Haas versus Imavov. And then we've got Alexei Olenek versus Chris Dukakis. And Alexei Olenek is just dangerous. We know Chris Dukakis is a heavy striker, great wrestler, but Alexei Olenek has probably more than 50 submissions to his name. He has 59 wins, only 14 losses. This man is a veteran, and he just keeps winning, man. Like, he's never getting close to that title shot, but he still keeps winning. So I'm excited for that fight. And then if that wasn't enough, the featherweight division, we've got Charles Rosa versus Derek Manier. And then the co-main event, Caitlin Vieira versus Ziana Kunitskaya. And the heavyweight main event, which is Curtis Blades versus Derek Lewis. So that's going to be all happening next week. I'll be covering that on Sunday. Coming up on Monday, you'll be listening to this on Monday when it comes out. But next Sunday, I will be reviewing that event. So stay tuned for that. I will see you guys after next Sunday's event. And I cannot wait for UFC 259. Until then, I will see you guys. Peace out, guys.
You've been listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast. Keep in touch with Dillo on his social media at Dillo Ross on Twitter and Dillo Ross on Instagram.